Well, you won't believe this, but this is Dan Rafael and Gareth A. Davies, chat number 20. Dan?
We reached the big 2-0. Are you recording it the right way?
I am. Well, let's hope so. Let's hope so on this celebratory boxing chat number 20, an anniversary of sorts.
Yeah. Let's
hope that they get to see both of us, not just me scratching my chin and picking my nose the whole time when I think I'm off camera or whatever. I'm being joyous, but it's a sad day for boxing, Dan. We're going to answer all the questions, loads of questions, but sad day because of the passing of Naazim Richardson.
Yeah, Naazim Richardson, one of the best boxing guys you'll ever know, a Hall of Fame caliber trainer in my opinion, and it was a rough day to wake up this morning. And as soon as I got up and I put my phone on, literally the first thing I heard my phone buzz, and there was a text message from Bernard Hopkins. Naazim had, sorry to hear that. Phone says, what happened? He said he died from a stroke. Naazim had a previous stroke several years ago that severely incapacitated him, but amazingly, he was able to overcome that. They didn't know if he was even going to live. Not only did he survive, but he was able to come back and continue to thrive as a boxing trainer. Maybe slightly diminished, but if you would see him at fights, and you didn't know that he had a stroke, you wouldn't even really know it. His speech was good, his movement was okay. And, ask anybody that ever dealt with Naazim Richardson, and they'll tell you that he was, a real man's man. I mean, just a great boxing guy, a great human being, a mentor to so many young fighters in Philadelphia. Just, a wise, sage person with a really, a really positive view of the world. And, he's something, I hope he gets in the Hall of Fame, but it's the kind of thing where you'd hope that would happen, while the person is still living. But
yeah.
Listen, one thing that as many years as he spent with Bernard Hopkins as an assistant trainer, first under Bowie Fischer, and then as Bernard's head trainer for, through so many of his huge fights. They weren't together for the last fight or two of Bernard's career, but they still had a relationship. But Naazim, one of the most famous incidents that I ever covered in boxing.
Margarito.
Exactly. He was the trainer for Shane Mosley. And on the night that he fought Antonio Margarito and scored that huge upset, he was the one that was in the dressing room watching the hand wraps who complained to the commission, which then discovered that there were illegal pads inside Margarito's gloves and made them rewrap. And then Shane Mosley went out and did the business. And by the way, other fighters after that would ask that Naazim, be with them to observe other guys' wraps, and he would do that on occasion. It's just it's just a bad loss for the sport.
Yeah, I mean, my experiences with him go back many years as well, and like you said, I would concur with all the things you said about him. And we were talking about how old he was before we came and recorded this, and we both think he's in his early 60s, but he had a kind of ageless mysticism about him, and you could talk spiritually with the guy. I mean, in the middle of the media room, in studios A and B, just before you went to the MGM Grand with one of his fighters, he was always capable of tuning into kind of universal things. It was about the betterment of people. There's a great quote from an article the New York Times did about him some time ago, Dan. I'm just going to try and pull this up and find this here a minute.
I think you're talking about, there's a piece that I saw on my Twitter feed, and I looked at it, and I remember reading it back at the time. I believe it's by Greg Bishop, who at the time was writing sports for the New York Times. And and I've said this to Greg, and I'll say it to everybody, whether he's writing about boxing or he's writing about any other sport out there. To me, Greg Bishop is one of the great American sports writers of our time. He is just phenomenal. I would marvel. I would go to a fight, and he didn't cover boxing all the time, but he would shoot in for some of the bigger fights and wasn't in it on a daily basis. And you know what? You'd read his clip, and you'd be like, damn, that dude just wrote the best story the whole week. And he's only been doing it for a couple of days on this story. I mean,
there's a lovely tribute, and it kind of says a lot about Naazim, which was, according to the New York Times, I don't know if it was Greg that wrote this, but this is the quote I found. It probably was him. Boxing took Richardson from the streets that almost swallowed him in North Philadelphia and gave him an energy and a purpose. And again, if it is Greg, that kind of sums up what this was. He made the people around him better people. And I'm not trying to be elegiac about it because he's just passed, but I felt I genuinely felt sadness in my body when I read that earlier on, like in my chest.
He's like a Yoda figure, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody looked to him for his advice. He was always the calm in the middle of the storm. You never saw him get too, crazy emotional one way or the other. Two of his sons became boxers, Tiger Allen and Rock Allen. Rock Allen went to the was a member of the United States Olympic team, was an undefeated rising prospect. He had a terrible car accident that ended his career. But, he seemed at the time to be on his way possibly to, big things as a professional. So he passed it on to his kids, and he trained so many of the fighters in the Philadelphia area, and was somebody that other trainers looked up to. I mean, here's the thing, Gareth, you've been around boxing a long time, and people backstab people and they say bad things about people.
Never said a bad word. Never said a bad
word. You could find anybody in any aspect of the sport, whether you're a boxer, trainer, television executive, media member, promoter, manager, whatever. You don't find people say bad things about Naazim Richardson. He's just the kind of guy that everybody had respect for.
But at the same time, he never said a bad word about anyone himself either. But at the same time, he was kind of brutally honest at times as well, But
he didn't hold back.
I mean, if you wanted
somebody to sugarcoat stuff or to bullshit you, he was not the guy to talk to.
Exactly. Well, Naazim Richardson, rest in peace. Yeah. Well, Dan, we've had a lot of questions. Brad Cooney asked us if we could talk about Naazim. We've just done that, and it will probably pop up again in the conversation today. A lot of questions about the Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr. September the 12th 8-round exhibition bout.
And I'll give a little plug before you go further. People can go on boxingscene.com and they can read the story that I wrote of my interview with Roy Jones about that, and he had a lot of interesting things to say about that particular fight and his anticipation of it and how the deal was made.
Yeah, well, Ted Corby's question is, what are the details? Will they wear headgear? How long will the rounds be? Will it be 3-minute rounds? Presumably it's no headgear, big gloves, and 3-minute rounds, no?
It is no headgear. It is 3-minute rounds. They will wear 12-ounce gloves instead of 10-ounce gloves, which would typically be what a heavyweight would wear. And Roy, I asked him about that, and he sort of joked. He goes, yeah, they're bigger, but they're not that much bigger. In other words, the extra 2 ounces, it may be more, just for looks than any real difference. If you're Roy Jones and Mike Tyson lands a great shot with you with a 10-ounce glove or an 8-ounce glove or a 12-ounce glove, it's not going to have that much big of a difference, and vice versa also. I mean, but yes, those are the general rules. And I went back and looked, Tyson had after he retired in 2005, after the Kevin McBride fight, a year and a half later, in need of money and in bad tax troubles and all that, he came back and he had an exhibition against one of his sparring partners named Corey Sanders. They did it in the Chevrolet Center in Youngstown, Ohio. I went back and I looked up what I had written about it at the time. And I went back and I looked at some of the video of it. First of all, it was such a dud of a fight and such a flop of a pay-per-view that what was advertised as Mike Tyson's world tour, they were going to go around the world and do these 4-round exhibitions all over the place. It was one and done. But the thing about it was, in that particular exhibition, Corey Sanders, he wore headgear. Tyson did not wear headgear, and they wore shirts. And it was a dreadful fight. Now, this is different. I believe they'll be like, they'll look like regular boxers, no headgear. I don't think they're wearing shirts, whatever. And it's an 8-rounder, not a 4-rounder. And obviously, Roy Jones is a higher level of a caliber opponent / name, certainly than the heavyweight Corey Sanders. And when I say Corey Sanders, so people don't mix it up, I'm talking about the African-American Corey Sanders, who spells his name Corey, who's from Washington, D.C. area.
South African.
The late big puncher, southpaw from South Africa, Corrie, who beat Vladimir Klitschko.
Who was, I think, horribly murdered, actually, in South Africa.
Corey Sanders from South Africa was indeed murdered, and it was
it was a terrible story. That of course he beat Klitschko, didn't he? So
he beat Klitschko, and he lost knockout to Vitaly Klitschko when they fought for the vacant title that Lennox gave up when he retired. So they were like the two top contenders, and Vitaly and him fought in the Staples Center, same site as Vladimir versus Lennox. They put on a tremendous fight. I was at that fight. I was at both of those fights, and he went on to win the vacant WBC belt. But the Tyson versus the other Corey Sanders exhibition was absolutely dreadful. So the Roy Jones Tyson exhibition
can't be any worse.
It can't possibly be worse. I mean, I can't imagine it being much worse. But we'll have to see. I mean, on September 12th, some will be disgusted by this fight, and others will be embraced it and be excited to watch it.
Well, I covered the news in today's Telegraph, and I've just written a column about it for the Telegraph. And having slept on it, my headline, really, my top line is, it shouldn't really be happening, but I will definitely be watching.
Well, you know what? I can't disagree with you about that. I mean,
you know, let me get through some of these questions. You keep digressing, Dan.
Sorry, bro.
I'm the world's worst digresser. You know that.
You're Mr. Digress.
Exactly, Mr. Digress. John Patricia says, so Tyson versus Jones is actually happening with a former NBA star versus a YouTube personality on the undercard. As Elaine Benner said, I am speechless. I am without speech. There'll be a lot of people like that, but I bet you watch. Dave Cushing says, and this is one for you to answer from last night's stuff, Dan. Guys, what fight from the Showtime boxing rollout are you most looking forward to? For me, it's Charlo versus Derevyanchenko. Great fight for both guys, and I think it's a 50-50. Thanks, guys, and I hope you're both well. My one, Dan, is Leo Santa Cruz and Tank Davis for me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's a fight I've liked for a long time, ever since the prospect of it was first brought up. But I'm also very interested in the other Charlo fight against Jason Rosario. Rosario was sort of like a lot of people thought when he beat Julian Williams to win the unified titles in the junior middleweight division, that it was a gargantuan upset. And yes, it was an upset. Personally, I did not consider it that massive of an upset. I had seen Jason Rosario fight. I knew he was a very good puncher. You know, I knew that Julian Williams, who was a very good fighter, but he had been knocked out previously by one of the Charlo brothers. And so when Rosario got to him, you know, maybe Julian was a little distracted by fighting at home, even though he tried to, you know, say that he wasn't. But the bottom line was Rosario was a good fighter, and when he knocked him out, it wasn't a shock to me. And I know he's very good. And so him against Charlo to unify those three titles, I find that to be a very interesting fight that I'm quite interested to watch among those matches that Showtime unveiled. But Gervonta and Leo Santa Cruz is a good fight. Derevyanchenko, the other Charlo, was a good fight. You know, in a sleeper fight, it's not going to get the most publicity. It's not going to probably draw the biggest ratings, but a sleeper fight that I think could become a very good back and forth action-packed fight. And I forget the date of it, but it's the welterweight interim title bout between Sergey Lipinets and Abdul Kakarov, who's not well known, but he put on a very good performance against Louis Collazo in one of the top ranks ESPN shows a number of months ago. I was in Philadelphia when he fought way deep on a buried on an undercard in the title eliminator against Obara from Japan that got him this opportunity. And that was also an exciting fight. And he did a good performance in that one too. So that, to me, that's the sleeper fight in my mind of what's about to happen on the Showtime schedule.
Rory S says, just in time for my bedtime listening, not in a boring way. Love this content. Boom Boom Coil says, Mike Tyson was just on First Take with Max Kellerman, and he said they will be wearing headgear. Well, as far as we understand,
the comments from Andy Foster, who's the executive director of the California State Athletic Commission, was, and again, I didn't talk to Andy, but in reporting by other boxing reporters who did speak to him, he made the point that there would not be headgear. So my impression is there will not be headgear. And honestly, if there was headgear, I think that's definitely a detriment to people buying the fight, because then it doesn't even look real.
Well, it doesn't even see them either, can you?
Even in the amateurs now, even in the Olympics, they don't wear headgear anymore.
Yeah. Well, Max Kellerman doesn't know anything, does he? Mike Tyson was probably fibbing to him. Okay, XT, you need to get a new handle, guy. You send us questions all the time. XTCALEXXTC. If Tyson and Jones had fought, he said thought, but it's fought when it was floated in the early 2000s, who would have won and by what method? I'll go first on that, Dan. Inside 5 rounds, knockout for Mike Tyson, in my view. But later than that, if it went later, if Roy Jones Jr. found a way of moving around the ring, he could have frustrated Mike Tyson, although I'm not sure he would have been able to put him away.
I disagree with you about that. I disagree. In the early 2000s, and when I say that, I mean the Roy Jones at the time he had defeated John Ruiz, because that's when this fight became a thing, that they might fight each other. Because I went back, and not that long ago, I was going through some of my way old USA Today clips as I was working on some other story. And you're
reading your old stories then?
Say again?
You're reading your old stories.
No, what I was doing was I was looking for a specific article that I had written on Shane Mosley and Oscar De La Hoya, because I was doing a piece on the 20th anniversary for the Ring magazine, and I wanted to see that piece. So I was going through a bag I had that I hadn't looked at in, like, I mean, who knows, 18, 19 years.
Oh, cuttings, yeah.
The actual clips from the newspaper,
Yeah.
because you can't even find some of those stories on the internet.
Yeah, true.
From a certain time period, they're just not there. Anyway, I'm going through the paper clippings looking for this piece on Oscar and Shane. And as I'm doing so, I'm finding like articles about other things, including, you know, I wrote about like the prospect of Bernard Hopkins against James Toney, about the prospect of Roy Jones against Lennox Lewis. But one of the things I found was also stuff about Roy Jones in a discussion of fights against Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson. And these were post having defeated Ruiz for the WBA belt. So at that time, when he was considering what he wanted to do, stay at heavyweight or go back to light heavyweight, where Carver was calling him out like a madman, he had come to the press conference. There was a lot of interest on Roy's behalf of fighting Tyson at that time. So that was still when Roy was the Roy we remember as being an all-time great pound for pound. He was number one. He had just moved up 2 divisions. He looked incredible against Ruiz, implemented the perfect game plan. That Roy Jones against the 2003, 2004 version of Tyson.
No, early 2000, so the 2001 version I'm talking about.
Well, I mean, that's still Tyson post-prison. And that still was not Tyson in his best. Remember, 2001 was when Mike got demolished by Lennox. So I still say that Tyson against that Jones, say anywhere from like 2000 to 2003, or that Roy Jones, based on the degradation of Tyson and how Roy was at his apex, you know, probably would have beaten him.
Oh, you stuffed in a real big probably then, bold underlines that I wasn't expecting.
Well, I'll tell you what, he would have beaten him.
There you go. There you go.
Because Mike Tyson,
what did you have for dinner last
being
night?
a real opponent in
This
years.
is the moment. This is the moment. What did you have for dinner last night?
We had burgers. Nothing fancy. They were pretty good.
This is what I'm going to do from now on. I'm going to review your dinners, not preview them.
Nothing exciting, I'm sorry to say. You didn't catch us on a night where she whipped up some kind of incredible like stir fry or shrimp dish or, you know, beautiful steak or chicken or something like that.
I just want to know what's the best day to come on the menu so that when I turn up in the area, I'd take you all out anyway.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you turn up in the area, we'll make sure that you have she'll cook a feast fit for a king.
Right, so Mr. PSB says, I absolutely love these episodes. Thanks, Gareth and Dan. Well, thank you. Paul from Tunbridge Wells, which is in Kent here in the UK. Super K says, I'm going for Jones Jr. by points win. As with the headgear, okay, well, let's ignore that for now. And the fact that he's been coaching all these years, he will outbox Iron Mike. You can learn more as a coach. Great content as usual, guys. CTZ says, love listening to these two. Dream team in the making. Keep it up, guys. Thank you very much.
Right, let's get to the questions instead of the ass kissing.
Yeah, well, hang on. Tim Thorne says, great show. Right. There's another question from the Untouchable on Roy Jones Jr. and Mike Tyson. Tyson in round 2, says Ed 1. They're allowed to get their questions read out, though. Okay. Okay, this is an interesting one. Rory S., you won't like this, but I'm going to ask you. One question I have for you guys. I'll post here as I don't have Twitter, but who else would be in line to fight the winner of Tyson versus Jones Jr. in this format, other than the obvious ones already mentioned, such as Holyfield? Asking
Roy
this.
Jones. Look, Roy Jones said to me very specifically, because I asked him, I said, Roy, you know, you're 51 years old. This is, you know, your first fight in a couple of years. You know, what is your plan beyond this, if any? He says, this is a one-off. He says, Tyson was the only name. If you read the quotes in the story on Boxing Scene, he was real specific about it. He said the only guy that he would have done this for was Mike Tyson, because that's who he wanted to fight back after he won the heavyweight belt in 2003. He said in the time period since he retired after the Scott Sigmund fight a couple of years ago, he was offered of money to do bare knuckles events. He was offered money to do this event, to do that event, to go to Saudi Arabia. He turned down everything. He said, I'm not interested. The only thing that piqued his interest was Mike Tyson. And basically he said, when Mike Tyson calls and he says, I want to fight, you say yes.
It's a bit like Barry.
He's always won.
I get it. I get it, Dan. I get it. But if Roy Jones Jr. beats Mike Tyson, or if Mike Tyson beats Roy Jones Jr., can you see Holyfield and Tyson doing this?
That's the only one that would make any sense. I mean, honestly, that was something that Tyson and Holyfield were.
Well, what about this one? What about this one from Ed One? Hulk Hogan versus Mike Tyson. Make it happen.
Why not have him wrestle a grizzly bear?
Right, this is a really good one. Leave the politics to the politicians. That's for you, not me, from Kyle Gallagher. Mr. PSB also, good evening, Gareth and Dan. Question. Who are your three, this is a great question, by the way, Mr. PSB. Who are your three boxing-related dinner party guests, dead or alive?
So who would you invite to a dinner party if you could invite three boxing guests, dead or alive?
Yeah, but from boxing-related dinner party guests.
Well, I would invite Muhammad Ali. I would invite Jack Johnson, who I find to be a fascinating character. I've been doing a lot of watching and reading about him, even though I've watched things in the past. But I find myself rewatching the incredible Ken Burns documentary that was done about him a number of years ago, and watching some of the footage and reading about him. Fascinating. So I would love to have a conversation with Jack Johnson. Ali, obviously, and a third one. I don't know. Who do you think? There's so many great names.
I'm going to choose mine. You invite yours. And the trouble is, they need to know what they're going to have for dinner.
That's a whole different ballgame. I don't know with a third one, but Ali and Johnson come right to my mind right off the bat.
Well, I'm going to go, because of our industry. I've never had a long sit down with Larry Merchant, and I think he's great company.
Well, Larry, from my perspective, wouldn't necessarily be my first choice, because Larry's a very, very, very dear friend of mine, and we speak on a regular basis.
I'm trying to construct a dinner here, yeah, and we'd definitely be having like a 5-6 course dinner with port afterwards and cigars and everything. This would be an 8-hour dinner, so I would invite Larry Merchant, and it's going to be on September the 13th, and it's going to be Larry Merchant, Roy Jones Jr., and Mike Tyson.
That's an interesting group of guys.
Who's your third?
Maybe Gareth Davies.
Hey, thank you very much for the invite. Kryptonite says, if this was a real fight at his best, Mike Tyson would murder a prime Roy. You are so right. Although Roy was quick, Tyson was as quick too. Tyson was as big and heavy hitting and would probably stretch him as soon as he landed.
Remember, Roy Jones turned professional as a junior middleweight.
Yeah.
Became middleweight champion and was a very smallish heavyweight when he won a belt against a really kind of second tier heavyweight in John Ruiz. He became the first former middleweight champion to win a heavyweight title in literally over 100 years, since Bob Fitzsimmons had done it in 1897. So Roy Jones, a much, much smaller man who later in his career showed that he didn't have the greatest chin. We never knew that because he was so indomitable that he never got hit really cleanly during the heyday. That of course the prime Mike Tyson's going to beat a Roy Jones. I don't even think I don't think Roy Jones would have a huge argument with that.
Roy's probably about 13 stone now, I'd say 14 stone, something like that.
Roy said to me, you can do the math. He told me, I asked him what his weight was. He said he was 208 pounds, and he's been in the gym.
15 stone, just below 15 stone. So okay. He's cruiserweight. He's cruiserweight.
Well, he's 8 pounds over cruiserweight, but if he was fighting in an actual boxing match, he could probably make cruiserweight with no problem.
Exactly.
8 pounds, no problem for him.
Yeah. But you'd expect him to have to do that at his age. Well, some people genetically, I'm sure he could get down. I bet he could get down to 12 stone still. But XTCALEXXTC says, can you do an episode, guys, on what the build-up is like during a big fight week in Vegas? I sat in bed this morning when I woke up and I saw that question and I thought about it for 5 or 10 minutes. I've got the structure in my mind. I promise we will do it soon. And it'll be interesting, but I'm going to jot down a little running order for it because because otherwise we'll be too random, because we get up to a lot in those fight weeks. Dan, we'll do it when we haven't got there's too much to talk about to do that.
That's fine. That sounds like a good topic. That'll be fun to talk.
Exactly.
You want to talk about digress? That one will have a lot of digressions.
Very knowledgeable about boxing and articulate. That's you. And all the off-topic discussion. That's me. Oh well, never mind. Just kidding. Right. I think I've got to go to. I think we're nearly out of questions. Believe it or not.
Well, we had a bunch on Twitter also.
I found them. I've done them already.
And there was also ones on the bottom of the previous videos.
And I got them as well.
All of them, there was definitely ones that you've missed. I know that.
Stop acting like the executive producer.
I'm the co-executive producer.
There are a couple more questions we haven't answered from before anyway. This is a good one. This is a good one.
Okay.
What would you say this is the same guy asking another question. What would you say are the main differences between fight shows in the US compared to the UK? Would love to get out to the States for a fight one day. I mean, maybe on this front, I'm a little bit more qualified than you are, having covered like half my fights in the US and half in the UK. And all I would say is this: the Americans really know how to build an event with a centralized, because of Las Vegas, what it offers when everything's centralized. And I've said this many times about why I love the MGM Grand and the media room we have there, is that so much, you literally fill your boots while you're there beyond the event you're at. And I think America's brilliant at doing that, Dan. And I think what we tend to do in the UK a little bit more, and you'll have noticed it when we're over here, is you have the set piece, then everyone goes home. You have the set piece, then everyone goes home. And there isn't the same working till midnight together all the time and all going out for dinners. And did you notice that while you were here?
Yeah, I think I know. You use some of your vernacular, your UK vernacular. I don't quite understand all the time. When you say set piece as far as the week, I think what you mean is in the UK, it's all about that one event period, nothing else.
Yeah, and then it's the end of the day. Everyone writes their stuff or they produce their stuff, and then everyone goes home and they come back the next day.
For the big fights in the United States, it doesn't matter if they're in Las Vegas and New York City and Los Angeles, whatever. The folks that put the event on have other events that they want to promote also. So inevitably, let's say it's Saturday day of the fight, they'll have some kind of press gathering with the participants in their next big event, and you go and you get a chance to talk to them. If let's say it's a top rank fight, all the other top ranked boxers are around the event during the week. You get a chance to interview their other guys and talk to their people and what they're up to and what fights they have coming up. If you go to a PBC event, inevitably there's 35 other PBC fighters who come to attend the event, and they're always around to talk to. In other words, you're there, of course, to cover the fight that's the main attraction of the week, but you have the opportunity to have FaceTime and talk to and interview all the people that are there, looking to talk about their careers and their other events that will be next. So even if you don't write it that week, you've got plenty of stuff to either, take your videos or fill your notebook or do your tape recorder or whatever, and you got plenty of material. And the promoters in America really know how to bring their other folks together to do that. And as you said, it's not quite the same in the UK. I'll say one difference though in the UK that's different and I think better than in America is your crowds are better. Your people turn out for the undercards. Ours, the hardcores for their particular fighter or the other who are there to support one or particular person on the card, they'll show up. But by and large, big and small arenas are largely empty until you get to the top level of the show, and that's kind of disappointing. So all these fights that are going on now, where there's no crowds, for some of those fighters who are undercard fighters, even on the big shows, it really isn't a big deal for them because they're used to fighting in front of only a few people. I've had a couple fighters since this started when the boxing were back in place that Top Rank was doing. I've had fighters tell me that it wasn't a big deal because they have had fights where there hasn't been big crowds because they've been on undercards. They're preliminary type fighters. So that's a big.
I think one of the other big differences when we're coming into those American events, unless you're doing one in Maryland or whatever and you're driving home, is that you're all conglomerating from all over the country, whereas people here are generally going home afterwards, genuinely going home because we're one country. So, like you say though, but latterly, I'd say in the last 6 years, we have had extraordinary crowds here. I've been watching old fights with you know, people like Chris Eubank from 20 years ago and so, and they weren't always completely full, you know, but I think the rise of Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, Eddie Hearn's power broking the competition just within one country between Frank Warren and the two TV stations and Eddie Hearn, Sky Sports, and it's created a competitiveness that has brought more people. You go ahead and look at some of the other questions if you can find them. But I think the key is there is more schmoozing in America, and I think the promoters know. I'm not saying the promoters don't know how to promote here. They promote in a different style, that very lavish American style. We have meals supplied. The media room's open from 9 in the morning till 6 in the evening. I've said it before. We're getting into the bloody Vegas fight week here, and I'm doing that on another show.
Let me say one thing about that, though. You know, I think Eddie Hearn has learned a lot about that because
he doesn't give us so much as a cardboard sandwich and a cup.
I'm not talking about that. I don't care about that stuff. I'm talking about being able to get information and news and do interviews with.
They bring more people. They bring more people.
So I went to Frisco, Texas for Eddie's card that was on February 29th. The main
it's
event
still in America, but it's still America. It's still culturally different. He doesn't do it.
But he still has to adjust. He knows the UK market, so he's a UK guy.
I think he's going to change it, Dan. I think it will become more like the American way.
Right, but I'm saying to you, because he's been able to adapt. So when he's been doing his shows in America,
he's learned. And he's learned from the UFC.
Be quiet for 20 seconds, and I'm going to tell you. He did the show in Texas. He had just signed this outstanding amateur kid, Mark Castro, a featherweight, who's going to have his pro debut on Eddie's card on August 15th in Tulsa. And he did what so many of the other American promoters did. He didn't just focus it on Garcia and Vargas. He brought in Mark Castro. He had him show up in the matchroom, you know, giant suite upstairs where there was sort of like their office in the hotel, and invited, you know, some of the press that was there. And we had an opportunity to meet Mark and his dad and his management and talk to them about his career plans. And you know, he was one of our top amateurs in America. And it wasn't even so much because they wanted you to write a story. It's just really a chance to meet the kid. And so he's in your mind when he turns pro.
He did the same here. We brought Gerald Miller over and stuff. He learned that from the UFC. When you go to a UFC International Fight Week in July in Vegas, there are so many events. It's just stupid, frankly. You know, and being an older journalist, I'm not going to events from 9:30 in the morning till 7:30 at night because they're putting 6-5 events on. You have to pick and choose. We are not journalists, you know. We are picking our theme, and we're going to go and do that theme. But I do think he's learned from the UFC, and he's learned from the American way of promoting. He's quite open about it. I mean, he said to me the other day in an interview that he wants to be the UFC of boxing, you know. And I said, what, the cartel? And he went, no. I said, I'm joking, but he reckons he can do it with women's boxing, you know, that if he signs up all the women, and he may well be able to do that.
Maybe, but there's no, I mean, look, you know, everybody, you know, I guess in this business, you know, in that position wants to rule the world. But, and I say this with no disrespect to the UFC or any boxing promoter, it's not good for there to be one promoter only, because from the fan perspective, they think, okay, in UFC, well, we get all the top fights we want, and we don't have to wait for so long to have them marinate or whatever. We get the top matches, you know, pretty much right away. And that's all well and good. I guess it does happen for the most part because boxing is more separated, and there's many more power brokers that put these events together, that it's hard to make the biggest fights. But it is. The worst thing that could possibly happen for boxers, the athletes, not the fans, the boxers, would be for there to be one singular entity, because now there's no competition.
Yeah.
If you are a free agent and you're at the top level, you've got Eddie and DAZN and Golden Boy and Top Rank and PBC and even Frank Warren and, you know, a whole variety of promoters throwing opportunity and money at you. And if there's one, the pay scale will go down. And all you have to do is look at what guys make, you know, even in like not even the elite level in boxing, but even a step down from that, they're still making more money generally than the top guys in the UFC. And that's just the reality. It doesn't mean that they don't do a good job promoting the fights in the UFC. They do a great job promoting the fights in the UFC. But the athletes don't make as much money. So I don't think that the boxers would want there to be one. And I just don't think that's going to happen, because there are too many people with egos and knowledge in boxing who are not going to let one person take over. I've been doing this for 20 plus years. You know how many, you know, as Bob Arum says, boxing is, the beaches are strewn with bleached bones of all these people who've tried to come in and recreate the wheel and take over and dominate, and one by one they go by the wayside. And boxing is, it's ingrained in the business that there are going to be competitions between the promoters. It's been that way for 50 years, and I don't see it changing. Now, it may be smaller group, it may be 3, 4, 5, not 10, 11, 12, but there's always going to be that back and forth between promoters. Now, the best thing that could happen was if they could more easily work together. And hopefully, like they did with PBC and Top Rank when they did the Wilder Fury deal. That worked out great for everybody, but we need more of that.
There's a question here from Gareth A. Davis. Does Gareth ever get a chance to say it? No, I'm only kidding. There's a question here, and it's about David Hay's final question tonight. That David Hay has brought out, have you seen it? The black VP195 mask, 30 times washable, from just 31 pence per day. 3-layer antibacterial. You're getting free advertising here, David A. Yes, they are comfortable too. Shop now. And I don't know if you know this, but it's now a regulation in the UK from today that you wear masks indoors. Yeah? When you're out and about, you have to wear them inside shops and restaurants. How I drink beer and tequila and eat with a mask on, I do not know. But we'll work that one out later when I go out, because I'm going out tonight, Dan.
Well, I just can say about our friend David Hay that I totally agree with him.
You nasty, nasty, teasing man. That pun doesn't grow old for you, does it? It's 10 years old.
Never.
That pun is 10 years old next year.
It's true. But look, I'm glad this back, I don't know, I think you might even snap the picture. I don't know, when it was like maybe a year or so ago or wherever. David was at.
I did take it for you, yeah.
And so, David, and everybody knows David and I have had our differences over the years, but we hugged it out. We're good. We took a picture.
Do you think?
Funny, we had a good laugh about it. David's a good guy.
Do you think in 20 years' time you could beat him in an eight-round exhibition bout?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. He would kick my ass no matter what. 10 years ago, today, 10 years in the future.
Maybe 20 years in the future, then.
50 years in the future.
Maybe 50, would he in 50 years in the future?
I got no shot with David Hay. Totally no shot.
My friend, it's always an absolute pleasure. Even when you keep talking over me and I can't get a word in edgeways, because I still love you.
You have a good time out tonight doing your carousing and your stuff in the UK.
Carousing? What, you trying to call me a miscreant now or something?
I'm not saying anything bad. I'm just being honest.
I'm going out in the open top Jag tonight. It's a beautiful evening. I've got my shorts on. I've been paddleboarding and canoeing and cycling all week between work. It's Joe Joyce and Michael Wallish this weekend. We've got Bellator tonight. There's UFC with a big guy called Darren Till, who's a big name in the UK, fighting in Abu Dhabi. There's a Top Rank this weekend or not?
No, we got tonight we're taping it. We got the return of Golden Boy Boxing on DAZN with Virgil Ortiz against Samuel Vargas. So the prospect of the year and his first fight of this year. So excited to see him back in action.
So what I was building towards was we'll probably catch up in 2 or 3 days' time after the weekend.
Sounds good.
Peace, brother.
Peace. We'll be back for show 21.